So what do you remember from yesterday's class regarding interpretation? What is interpretation?
Interpretation means understand the.
Yeah, understand.
You have to understand and you have to translate it now.
Yeah, understanding the true meaning, right? Understanding, translate as in it's not like document is in English, we are translating it to some other language. It's basically understanding, right? We want to understand what is the true meaning of that legislation. So why we need interpretation?
To make law.
We need interpretation for two main things. First of all, a layman may not understand legal language, right? We discussed yesterday. Who is a layman?
Layman, ma'am.
Yeah.
Layman is cat.
Someone who is not having technical knowledge on that particular thing, right? I
Yes,
be a layman for an engineer or a doctor, but doctor or engineer will be a layman for a legislation, right? So whoever is not having technical knowledge, that person is a layman. So we need to interpret, to understand the true meaning. Why? So that a layman can also understand what the law is, right? Because in first semester, you are finding it difficult to understand these legal terms, right? That means what? Now you are a layman for legal language also, but as you start with your course, you will become expert in those technical words, right? So layman is a person who do not know those technical words. So for them, we need to interpret, right? So that they also understand it. And second one is legislative intent. We have the legislation, but we want to understand with what intention this legislation was introduced, right? So these are the two main reasons why we need interpretation of statute.
Okay.
So what are the rules of interpretation?
Legislation, executive and judiciary.
Those are organs of government, right? There are three organs: executive, legislature, and judiciary. So who will interpret legislation? Which organ will interpret legislation?
Legislation, executive, ma'am.
Not executive. So legislation will give the law, executive will pass some orders, notifications, etc., and judiciary will interpret, right? Because judiciary will give punishment. So they need to understand what the law is, and then only they can apply, right? So you can remember this definition as well regarding interpretation. Now we need to understand rules of interpretation. What is rules of interpretation, right? Interpretation means what? Understanding true meaning. Fine, we need to understand the true meaning. But how will you understand the true meaning? Right? Like you want to read this legal method subject. Maybe you are attending your college classes. Maybe you are doing some extra classes. Maybe you are reading it yourself. Right? Maybe you are referring some guidebook. That means you can follow different rules to understand this subject. Similarly, judges can also use different ways of interpreting, right? By different ways, they can try to understand what is the true meaning. So there are basically four important rules of interpretation that you need to remember. Okay, so you know why we need interpretation. Interpretation means understanding true meaning of the legislation, right? Why we need interpretation? So that even a layman can understand it, and we are able to understand intention of legislation, why this legislation was introduced, right? Now four rules are there that will be applied, right? Basically they tell about four different ways of understanding the true meaning. Okay, so what are these four rules? One is literal or grammatical rule. Second is mischief rule. Third is golden rule. Next one is harmonious construction rule. Okay, so we have four different rules of interpretation that you need to understand. And I'm almost sure there will be a question with regard to this in your exam, right? So maybe you can remember this, and if they ask a question, you can write rules of interpretation. You can put 4 arrows and then mention these 4 different rules also, and then accordingly explain one by one. Now, this table will help you understand what these rules are basically, but again, we have discussed in detail also. All right. So first one is literal or grammatical rule. Okay, so if you are saying something, we often use, right? Like literally, I was shocked. What is literally? That means exactly like I was really shocked, right? You use this word, right? When you are saying something like literally it happened. That means what? It exactly this only happened. So same literal or grammatical rule. What they will do is that the ordinary, natural, or popular or literal meaning of the words has to be taken into consideration. Okay, if there is a provision, whatever is written there, right, that we will understand. I will just give you one example. Take for example, no person shall be deprived of his right to life and personal liberty. There is a provision under constitution. All right, it is a provision under constitution, article 21. Okay, article 21 of Indian constitution says, this is only an example. Okay, you don't need to write this in exam for your understanding. Take for example, there is a provision, article 21 of Indian constitution. What is written there? It is written, no person shall be deprived of his right to life and personal liberty. Okay, so now if we want to interpret this thing, if we want to understand what they meant by it, we will look at the ordinary meaning of these words, right? Normally what we understand by person, we understand men, women, or any other gender also, right? So same meaning we will give here. No person, that means it may be a citizen also, it may be a foreigner also, it may be men, women, any other gender also, right? We will give that meaning. Shall be deprived. What is deprived? You are not given something, right? That means no person shall be deprived of his right to life. What is life? Survival, right? Like, yeah, survival, right? So we will understand the, okay, fine, survival. And personal liberty. What is personal liberty? The person should be free, maybe to speak, maybe to start a vocation, maybe to go anywhere, right? So we will accordingly understand. So in literal or grammatical rule, we will understand what is the popular meaning of those words, right? Popular meaning as in commonly what we use, right? Ordinary or popular, that means ordinarily, by no person we do not just restrict to Indian citizens, but it will be any person, right? Any person, whatever gender, whatever age, does not matter. No person means just any person will be included there. Deprived as in not giving. Right to life as in the person should not be killed, and the person should be allowed basic liberty or basic freedoms. All right, so we will understand ki, okay, fine, under literal rule we will try to give those common or popular meaning to each and every word, and then we will try to understand what this provision is basically. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, next one is mischief rule. Now, mischief rule finds out the defect. What is mischief basically is some kind of a defect. All right, like if you are destroy, like strike, you understand, right? People protest, there will be strike. Okay, in strike, take for example, you are protesting against your university. All right, in protest, if you try to destroy your university or college property, that will be mischief, as in you are destroying or you are causing some defect or destruction to university property. That means you have committed mischief. Okay, so mischief basically means some defect, some fault, right? So mischief rule tries to do what? It finds out mischief or defect in the statute. All right, whatever statute we have, it will try to see what are the defects in the statute and then provides remedy for the same. It closes loopholes in the law and develops new law. New law. That means it tries to fix whatever defects are there in the existing law. All right. So we will see examples also. You will understand this better. Take for example, here what happens? Same example we will take, all right. A provision is that no person shall be deprived of his life and personal liberty. Now, under personal liberty, they are just saying that, yeah, you should be able to eat, you should have a shelter, and what is the other one? You should have clothes to wear. That's all personal liberty means. Okay. Now we feel that no, these three are not the only personal liberty that we need. We also need freedom to speech, right? So in mischief rule, what they will do, they will say that personal liberty is a word. We usually understand it to be food, clothing, and shelter, but it should also include right to speak, right? That means mischief rule tries to find out the defect. What is the defect? This provision is there, but it is not giving us liberty to speak, right? So it will try to fix that. It will say personal liberty also includes right to speech, right? So by applying this only, we have interpreted Article 21 so many times. Now it includes right to go to right to travel abroad, right to privacy, right to education, right to livelihood, right? So all those are included. How? By finding out the defect that we have under Article 21. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you able to relate, or you are finding it like too philosophical or something? Is it relatable?
No, ma'am, I'm understood. Yes, ma'am.
Understood, right? Okay, fine. So literal as in whatever is the ordinary or popular meaning, you give those meanings to each and every word and then finally come to a conclusion. Mischief as in, mischief means defect. So you try to figure out what is defect in that existing legislation and you try to close those loopholes. How you will close it? By interpreting. You will say personal liberty also includes right to speech, right? So that is mischief rule. Third one is golden rule. If considering natural meaning of the words lead to injustice, courts must modify meaning to remove injustice. Now, here what we are doing, we are giving meaning to each and every word, right? Each and every word we are giving meaning. But after, like these are individual words, right? We gave meaning to each and every word, and finally we see that this is not making much sense, right? This is not giving justice to people. In that case, what we will do is we will try to fix it in such a way that this injustice can be removed, all right? And it will make some sense based on the purpose why that legislation was made. Okay, if we are giving meaning to each and every word and then find out that this is making no sense or maybe it will be injustice, we will try to modify this a little bit based on the object why this legislation was introduced. Is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
So that is why it is called as golden rule, because it will solve all the problems, right? That's like the best rule because we have the option of modifying it a little bit based on the object of that particular legislation. All right, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Next one is harmonious construction rule. So harmonious construction, it can be understood from the name also. What is harmony? It's like harmony, right? How you can have harmony when two things are properly there in place, right? It's not conflicting or something. That's harmony. Harmonious construction rule. That means you should construct provisions in such a way that there is harmony between two different provisions, right? Two different provisions are not conflicting or contradictory to each other. They should exist at the same time harmoniously without conflicting with each other. All right, that is harmonious construction rule. Applied when there is a conflict between two or more statutes or between two provisions of the same statute. It may be one legislation is there, like Indian Constitution, but there are two provisions which are like conflicting, right? Take for example, you are saying that I have my exams from 16th of March, but I'm saying no, you don't have your exams from 16th of March, you have from 16th of some April. In that case, what happens? We both are giving conflicting statement, right? So what this rule will do is that it will try to balance both the things. Okay, it will say, okay, fine, you have one subject on 16th of March and another subject on 16th of April. That means what? You are also true, I am also true, right? Harmoniously, we both are existing and there is no conflict between us, right? So that is what harmonious construction is, that with harmony, both of you exist, all right? You should not conflict with each other. It may be two provisions of a same statute or it may be two different statutes.
Okay.
Okay, so can you tell now what are these different rules? What is literal or grammatical rule?
Literal rule, actually, harmony rule means it will balance both the sides, ma'am. Because you are right and I am also right.
Then?
It will pass the statement. Passes the statement.
What?
It passes the statement.
Okay, so it will balance both the two provisions. Yeah, and?
Yes. And golden rule, it says.
What is literal or grammatical rule? First one.
It will say right to life. We have to right to life, and
that is just an example. That is just an example. You can just say what you will do in case of literal or grammatical rule. Whatever popular or common meaning is there, right? We will give those meaning to each and every word. If there is a provision, we will try to give common or popular meaning to each and every word and then finally come to a conclusion. Okay? Use common or popular meaning of each and every word and then finally come to a conclusion. What is mischief rule?
Ma'am, sorry, popular and conclusive.
Popular and common, right? Whatever is very common, whatever is very popular, that we will give. What is mischief?
We have, we won't give popular and common rule. Common.
Yeah. What we will do then? What mischief means?
Mischief means some kind of a defect.
Yeah. So what you will do in case of mischief rule?
Well,
whatever defect is there, you will try to fix it, right? If mischief means defect, whatever defect is there in the legislation, you will try to fix it, okay, by interpreting it in such a way. All right. What is golden rule? Golden rule means?
Mischief rule, we have to, whatever defect is there, we have to
fix it.
There is a legislation. We have to fix it.
Whatever defect is there in a legislation or in a provision, you will fix it by interpreting it in such a way. What is golden rule? Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so golden rule means
Po-
what? When you are
Positive
give,
or negative, positive and negative in the, interjection governing conduct, ma'am.
okay. So
Now,
when you are giving literal meaning, right? When you are giving ordinary or popular meaning to all the words, but then you find out that this is not making much sense, or it is giving injustice, right? It will be injustice or inconvenience. Then you try to interpret it in such a way that all these injustice and inconvenience can be removed, right? So in golden rule, you try to remove injustice. From where this injustice is coming? By giving ordinary or popular meaning to all the words. Whatever injustice is being created, that you will remove. All right, so these are the 4 different rules of interpretation that we have. We will see in detail also. Okay, in that case it will be much clearer. So this is literal or grammatical rule. This is the first rule of interpretation. According to this rule, the words used in text are to be given or interpreted in their natural or ordinary meaning. Whatever ordinary meaning is there, that only you try to give, and then accordingly understand. According to this rule, the only duty of court is to give effect if the language of the statute is plain and has no business to look at consequences which might arise. So you basically simply give the meaning, popular meaning to the words, and then you try to understand what this is. Okay, so there was one case where what happened is a person was caught along with counterfeit currency dollars, all right, fake dollars, and he was charged under provisions of Indian Penal Code. So Indian Penal Code basically provides punishment if you are having fake currency notes, but Indian Penal Code do not So Indian Penal Code has not specified whether it will include foreign currency notes or not, because dollars is foreign currency, right? So whether it includes foreign currency or not, that is not specified under IPC. So court held that the word currency note or bank note cannot be prefixed, the person will be liable. That means the person was held liable even though he was having false currency dollars. All right, why? Because we have just mentioned currency note, we have not mentioned Indian currency notes or something like that. That is the reason why it was included. Basically, what is currency note? Any country, it can be of any country, right? So simply they understood currency note may be of any country, so simply make the person liable.
okay.
Okay, so you do not
What you
see
underline? What you
this.
underlined is the case.
Yeah,
This
this is the
case, ma'am.
case. Yeah. So do you find it difficult to remember this part, or is it fine for you? This much?
I'll remember it, ma'am.
You will remember, right? So in notes, right, I will put this also, because I am like almost 90% sure there will be a question from interpretation. You can put this also. Okay, I will not give this much big for you. Just in 1 or 2 sentences I will try to sum it up, and you can just remember this. Okay, you can
Okay.
remember. So literal or grammatical rule basically means whatever true meaning is there, or common or popular meaning, you give that meaning and then you accordingly try to understand it. All right.
Okay.
Next is mischief rule. What happens in case of mischief rule? We try to understand whatever problems are
Whatever
there.
defect is there, whatever
Yeah.
defect is there, we have to in legislation we have to
Hmm.
fix it by interpreting
Yes.
it, ma'am.
Yes, we need to interpret it accordingly. So there was one case also, it's a foreign case, where what happened is that there were prostitutes who were soliciting in the streets of London, and it was creating a very big problem in London. All right, so what they did is they were having a legislation called Street Offences Act. That means whatever offences you are committing in streets, with regard to that this legislation was. So under this legislation,
Okay.
whatever crime you are committing in at a street, you can be held liable. So just because they were having this legislation, what was done is that case was filed against those prostitutes and they were held liable. All right, so they were held liable under this legislation. Prostitutes started soliciting, and after that what they did is they started soliciting from windows. All right, windows or from their balconies. Again case was filed, but they said that we are not committing any offense at the street, right? So we cannot be held liable. We are doing it from our windows or balconies. So in this case, court applied this mischief rule and they said okay, there is a defect in this legislation, Street Offences Act, because it is just including whatever is committed at the street, but it should also include those soliciting from windows or balconies. So they applied mischief rule and said that these prostitutes will be held liable even though they are soliciting from windows or balconies. All right, that means what? We are having this legislation, Street Offences Act, but this legislation was not sufficient to deal with the problem. Right? There was a defect. That defect court tried to fix by interpreting it in such a way that it will include even though a prostitute is trying to solicit from windows or balconies. All right, is this part clear? Like we have a legislation, but it's basically not serving the purpose, right? So you accordingly interpret it so that it serves the purpose.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so for 4 different rules, you just need to remember this much. Is it possible?
Yes, ma'am.
Possible, right? So I will just write this in 2 or 3 sentences and you can accordingly remember the case law. Okay, when I share the document with you, I will do that.
Ma'am, this I have to only read, no, ma'am?
Read as it? Yeah, just to understand. You don't need to write this much. I will make it short for you.
For functions of law also, prepare notes, ma'am.
Yeah, functions of law also I'll prepare.
Okay.
Yeah. So for now, I just told you that you try to remember the headings for all the different 14 things.
Yes,
you can do that. You can remember, okay, fine, there are 4 different rules of interpretation. Definition part you can remember. Otherwise, I'll just make it short so that you can directly read from there. Because obviously it's not possible to write this much, right? So I'll do that.
Okay.
What is golden rule? When you are interpreting by way of the grammatical or literal rule, you are giving true meaning of each and every word. It may be, what happens is, it may lead to injustice, right? It may not make much sense when you interpret the legislation. At that time, you will apply golden rule to solve all those problems that has arisen because of the grammatical rule. All right, so literal rule follows the concept of interpreting the natural meaning of words, but if doing so there is any kind of problem, then court will modify the meaning in order to remove those injustice or problem that may be there. All right.
Okay.
So there was one legislation where it was said that there is basically a time limit fixed when you can appeal. That is 6 months when order is being passed. So court said, okay, fine, it's 6 months within which you need to approach the court and file an appeal. But later on it was said that 6 months is not the proper time, but appeal was filed beyond 6 months and appeal was rejected. So court said that this period of 6 months should be counted from time when this person came to know, because interpretation was leading to, it was not properly serving the purpose, right? So we should not give literal meaning to the words. Whenever needed, we should try to fix those defects that has been created because of interpreting under literal rule. Okay, I'll give the cases in 1 or 2 sentences. Okay. And last one is harmonious construction, where we basically try that 2 provisions of a same statute will coexist or 2 legislations will coexist. It happened with regard to this case, MSM Sharma versus Sri Krishna Sinha. What happened here is there were 2 provisions of constitution which were conflicting with each other and court tried to balance that out. right? Court basically said that one provision is superior, another one is inferior, but they both will exist at the same time. So accordingly, I'll give for this one also. No worries about that. You can remember this part, okay? Then you can write one conclusion, all right, that everyday working of courts involves interpretation of statutes because it is duty of judiciary to act according to the true intention of legislature, right? When a law is passed from legislation, judiciary should ensure ki, okay, fine, this is why this law is brought, and accordingly they should try to serve that purpose. So statutes are to be interpreted to enforce the law and also to avoid miscarriage of justice, right? Why law is there? We studied in our first class. It is to provide justice.
It is to, yes, ma'am.
Provide justice, right? So if law is not providing justice, it will be of no use, right? So we will have to interpret it in such a way that it is providing us justice, okay? And it is not leading to injustice of any kind. But if in interpretation or the result is injustice, some kind of inconvenience or problem, it should be avoided, and the one which supports justice, right? In whatever way you can, you try to provide justice to the people. That is why we have different rules, so that based on the situation, that rule can be applied and justice may be provided. Why? Because ultimate aim of law is to provide justice only. Is this part clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So do you need this entire document, or you want me to like frame proper answers for you so that you can directly read from there?
I'll directly, but to understand, I have to do, ma'am. Tomorrow, if you'll ask questions, I have to read, ma'am.
So how I will give you the entire document, or I will just frame the answer and give it to you?
Today only you'll frame, ma'am.
Yeah.
At last you'll frame.
Yeah, today I can say.
Or else do tell all the syllabus and send me answers at last, ma'am.
Okay, fine then. So I can do one thing also, right? For this part, right? I can send it to you today so that you can start preparing also at the same time. And whenever we are doing whatever things, I will, like keep sending you so that you don't wait for the last time, right? So this part I will share so that you can start preparing at least these two questions. What is meant by interpretation of statutes and rules of interpretation? Okay, because this is like very important and I feel there will be questions from this part.
Okay, ma'am.